Lowell, Carl. No, I don't see her on yet.
Well, it's 2 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started.
Okay. Steve Siegel.
Mike, to let you know, Jennifer Ewer, our chair-elect, will be joining us also. She'll be the county chair starting in January.
Good.
Okay, great. There's Mayor Kiewit.
Oh, there she is. Okay, good.
All right, we'll get started then. Welcome, everyone. Sorry for the virtual, but I didn't want to infect anybody, so I'm trying to isolate here for the day. Any comments on the 11/14 meeting minutes? Okay, I did have one on Cowie, just for clarification for everyone. Cowie is not a construction firm, COWI. They are actually a design firm. Just to make that note, it indicated they were construction. They were actually a design firm. So, previous action items. The top one there, the BO did receive information back from ODOT that they're sending off the BO to their design and technical group to look at the documents again. And sorry, that's vague, but that's literally what I got from them. So I have followed up with their email asking for specifics. They said they sent them off based on, yes, Arthur, thank you. I will be careful with the acronyms. The biological opinion, they indicated that something on a recent bridge has made them feel like they have to go back and do a technical look at the biological opinion. That was the extent of what the email said. So I did send them an email back and asked for some more specifics as to what exactly happened on that bridge and how does it relate to our project. And then give us some specifics on what actions we need to be taking so that we can continue to move forward. I have not heard anything back on that. Kevin and myself did meet with WSP this morning and asked them to also reach out and ask them specifically what questions that they may have, as well as have WSP's putting together a timeline of all the meetings, technical meetings and meetings that happened over the last 2.5 years, where all of this was previously discussed and talked about and coordinated with them. So we will continue to press that and press to move that forward. I did also in the email, and I think Kevin did this also, was requested that someone attend our January 9th meeting and update us on kind of where this is and what the next steps are. So we'll keep everyone updated as we get more information on what's going on with that. Arthur, you have a question?
Other than, I know this is extremely frustrating for you and we have a schedule, we're trying to keep on the schedule, but what is the actual import of this? Does this move a critical path? And what critical path is this in line for?
Well, it is in order to just show the completion of the environmental phase of the project. And when we were in DC, 3 of the meetings, this came up. Senator Merkley, Senator Murray, and also even with the state, the Office of the Secretary, all asked the status of the FEIS and the ROD and emphasized the importance of getting this done. We had some discussions about what the status was and where it was in the process, and that it was outside of the port's control right now because it's in the biological opinion, which is something that ODOT is in charge of writing. So they all, were expressed kind of concern over the timing and offered to maybe to reach out and inquire about what the status and issue is with the biological opinion. So I think biggest thing for us is it's critical path to us getting funding, I believe, on this project.
Okay, so it is in the money path, which is our critical path. So I understand that. And let me just do a quick introduction. Jennifer Ewer just joined us. She is our chair-elect for the Hood River County Board of Commissioners, and she wants to do her homework and find out what we're doing. So she's attending the meeting today.
That's great. Welcome.
So Arthur, just to reinforce what Michael said, when we were in DC and we were talking to the various congressmen and Department of Transportation, it became very evident to us that getting the ROD done is really important in seeking and obtaining federal grants. And there was a number of them that came out pretty strong in that position. So it was interesting. We found this latest effort out while we were actually meeting with one of the senators. I think Mike got a text to let us know. So it was kind of a last minute surprise on us.
And do we have any estimate now from them or any metric which we can use to judge whether we're proceeding or not?
Well, I mean, there was no indication it was going to stop any process. It was just how much more of a process we're going to have to take. But they gave us no indication in the email what the extent of the comments were, what additional information, if any, they're looking for. So that was one of the reasons. Then the response back to them was, you know, what does this mean, like time-wise and you know, level of effort and how do we resolve it if we don't have the specifics to what you're looking for?
I guess the reason I'm asking is because, you know, before we were pretty much told, look, don't push on this because, you know, these are technical people and you push and you just get people pissed off. And I get that. And I'm wondering if you have in your mind some line which, you know, if we're going to cross that line when we get political.
Well, and we didn't get, I'll say it this way, we did not get political when we were in DC. We were asked by them what the status of it was because we had given them an update in July that said that it was coming at the end of the year. So they had remembered those conversations and had brought them back up and asked, you know, well, what is the status of your FEIS and ROD? So we just informed them of kind of where the status was and the time frame that we were working under. And they offered up to, you know, to inquire in and ask kind of what the status, you know, what the holdup might be or what the next steps might need to be. So I guess one other thing that we don't really know yet is if this is coming from NMFS or NOAA, or if it's something that ODOT has generated. You know, ODOT has to do the biological opinion process. They're in control of going through that process, but they do have to report to NMFS with the question, with the report and get the approval through NMFS. So these questions could be coming from NMFS, but again, they haven't been clear with us. So we've asked the questions of, you know, just asking for some clarity around this.
Yeah, so a couple other thoughts on that. When we talked to the folks back east, they, again, as Mike said, they asked about the EIS. We said, we're not asking for help today, but we may be asking for help tomorrow, and we explained the situation. That's when a couple of the senators said, we'd be happy to make a phone call if you want us to do that. There's another piece to this that I think came out in the Department of Transportation discussion, and that is, if you remember in past discussions, the EIS would require the MOAs, a memorandum of understanding with the tribes, to be approved prior to the ROD. We thought, well, we could eventually split them apart as long as the EIS was totally done with the biological opinion and so on. The impression that I got, and others jumped in, that's not going to work. We've got to drive to get the MOUs done with each of the tribes to make it a complete package.
Yeah. And Sam Hunadius, do you have a question? You're with ODOT.
Well, just a comment. If you have not received any particular milestone to figure out how about the status and all that, I can discuss it internally and find out more details if that's something that you'd like me to do.
If you could, I sent an email back to Carol on Friday. I didn't heard anything from her today. She's usually pretty responsive in getting back, but if you wanted to just, I don't know how much you see Carol, but I have a meeting with her tomorrow where I was going to follow up with her also, so.
Okay, why don't you then discuss it with her? And if you're not getting any additional response, let me, at least from my end, figure out what I need to do.
Okay, thanks, Sam.
Just let me know.
Will do. Thank you. Okay, any other questions related to the biological opinion? All right, so down to the Bi-State Bridge Commission, the discussions on that, we did send a survey out for the primary place of business that is underway right now. I think we're right around 1,900 responses, so we're getting a pretty strong response on it. So we'll summarize those up. It goes through the 19th. Is that correct, Jessica? If that's incorrect, let me know. And we'll get the results out, and then we can make a recommendation for how to move forward with that piece of the Bi-State Bridge Commission.
Kind of an intermediate status. What's it showing?
I'm wondering, Mike, we're preparing like a little snapshot. Do you want me to, I can send that to you, Mike, and then we can decide how much that, I really hesitate to send out too much survey results midway, just because I don't want to spend any effort on things that might change over the next week. I will say it's about, it's looking like the preference is Hood River, but we also have a fair number, I think like almost 30 to 40% of people that answered that they didn't care. So, it comes, there's pros and cons to both. And then I will say that we have had like 1,200 people opt in to receive email addresses or to give us their email addresses, which is great in terms of the Bi-State working groups or the commission's email list moving forward, which is really an excellent part of it. At least I really care about that.
How about the split between Washington and Oregon respondents?
I haven't looked at that yet. I just have the zip code, so I have to put in the zip codes. But we can make sure that we give you like a little bit of a snapshot update on that.
You had sent out a snapshot last week. Can you
Yeah.
put the same type of thing together and send it out?
Yep, I have
tomorrow?
my coordinator working on that, so I should have that to you by the end of the day or tomorrow morning, Mike.
Okay.
And then we'll let you decide, how far, if that's a good enough snapshot. If we need a little bit more information, I think we'll pull that zip code information, Mike Fox, because I think that was a really good point. So we'll have that a few more data points in that snapshot.
Okay. All right. The CFA, I think, is still in review.
Suggestion, tomorrow night, the port's spending their entire meeting on just going through legal counsel's comments on the CFA. How are we doing on the other areas? Could maybe Commissioner Anderson give a quick brief? Has Klickitat looked at it, and how is it going?
Yeah, between each iteration, we send it over to our prosecuting attorney and he reviews it and gives any thoughts for changes.
How about Mayor Keebler?
We reviewed it, and other than Scribner's or just grammatical notes, no additional changes.
How about Mayor McBride?
I have got the flu, so my voice is really bad. Our city attorney's looked at it. Has he gotten back to you, Mike?
I haven't seen, Kevin, have you seen anything? I have not seen anything. Or Steve? I think he was on.
Okay. I'll check with Abigail and I know Dan was gone for a couple weeks on vacation, our attorney, but I'll check in with Abigail and see where that is.
Do you know whether he had significant comments or?
I don't know. I mean, I know he has it, but I thought he was just going to directly send any comments But I'll check.
Okay, how about Mayor Kiewit?
We've looked at it and we don't have any major changes either.
Okay. How about Commissioner Babbage?
We've looked at it for substance and didn't have any major changes on substance. We haven't had the legal review. Legal indicated that they were happy to review it after we had agreed on substance. So we're kind of doing it. We're not getting a legal review of this first pass through. There is a discussion on a separate discussion on the nomination process, which I assume you'll bring up differently.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Mike.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, and I guess that would be the next kind of topic on the CFAs was the nomination processes. That's a little bit separate of getting the CFAs done, but I know both the Oregon and Washington side were working on that development, so. Do we want to get an update from each side on where they are with the nomination process?
I can give ours if you'd like. So we received a draft from Mike of a proposal, and I made extensive changes to it, sent it back to Mike, and he sent me a reply saying that he thought that it was fine. There was one piece which I didn't fill out because basically he had in his document, he had basically duplicated something which was already in the CFA, and I suggested instead referring to the CFA. And he asked me if I would make those textual changes, and I have not had a chance to do that yet. But I think we are in agreement. We just need to get someone who's got a few spare minutes to go and dive into the legal references so they can specify the right chapters for everything.
And Mayor McBride, that was a version that you've seen. I sent that to you. How about on the Washington side? Have you guys started anything on your nomination process?
Arthur, was that internally how you guys are going to do it at the county level?
Yeah, well, basically, what we did. So first of all, the agreement I thought was that each county would work with its localities to establish a local nomination process. They don't have to be the same. I'm happy to share with you what we're doing, and yeah, it basically describes a process by which the county commission makes the decision, runs the process and makes the decision, but that it gives special status to the cities and to the port, so that their input is considered in the process.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see that. We've got our own, internal way that the commissioners do our committee assignments that we created last year, and I think we were all in agreement that the cities would have their say as well. But formalizing that would probably be a good idea at the beginning of this new year for us.
I'll pass it along.
Thank you.
Ours, we did discuss it at our last Board of Commissioners meeting, and the commissioners gave a good nod. I see Bob is here now. Commissioners gave a nod, and basically it sounds like no one had a strong opinion about it beyond what we had already discussed. So we're simply going to keep moving forward on it.
And is the goal that we have this completed by the end of this year so that appointments can be made early in 2023?
Yeah, it's all tied back into the CFA. Assuming that we get the CFA approved, say in January, the schedule, the draft schedule that's in that document indicates that the two counties would make the assignment of the board, the new board, in February. So February through June, it would be kind of shadow with us. And then come July 1st, the new board takes over and we drop away.
So our plan is this will not be on our agenda for our Board of Commissioners for next Monday. So it will be in January that we would look at actually ratifying it. But people have seen it, so it's not a very long process. So having it ratified in January would allow us to then make appointments in February or at least take nominations in February.
The one little stickler that I think, I hope everybody picks up on is, it was a footnote in the board section where there was a statement made by the Port Legal Counsel, a recommendation that if you are a public official,
Elected official.
yeah, you elected official, you cannot be on this new board.
So you were going to get back to us with an explanation from your attorney as to where that comes from. We
Yeah,
requested that.
we're discussing that tomorrow night. It looks like when you really check the law, there's not an issue with Oregon. There is potentially an issue with Washington state law. And it all has to do with conflict of interest. Again, it's not an issue for Oregon. It may be an issue for Washington folks. And as soon as we get through tomorrow night, I believe I can send you the analysis that we went through from the port point of view to everybody. So you get a little heads up on that.
I see it as hard to believe considering how many different boards were appointed and elected to. as officials.
I agree. I think it's silly. But
But remember, the basic question we have is this a legal opinion or is this their best practices that they are recommending based on their knowledge of how organizations work?
it's their interpretation of legal.
Okay,
So, okay, Mike. Proceed, please. You're on mute, Mike.
Sorry about that. I'm gonna skip the DC trip for a minute. We can cover that in just a minute. The Treaty Tribe MOAs, the status is pretty similar on that. We've sent that to ODOT. ODOT is preparing to send that to Yakima. That should go to Yakima, the first draft this week. And then the next two tribes, which would be the Nez Perce and Umatilla, we should get drafts over to ODOT this week that would be ready to go to those two tribes early next year. So we're on our way with the discussions with those tribes. Brian,
I would suggest, in this particular activity, it says we're going to develop a delivery schedule. And I think we got to pay attention to that, Mike, and get all four of them laid out in a schedule.
Yep.
And based on what I heard in DC, I think we got to put a full court press on this.
yeah, I talked to Herb about that this morning and Brian, and they're going to get together. We're going to work up a schedule for each tribe. They can run in parallel. We're going to make an assumption that we're going to have to go back to them at least 3 times with a 60 to 90 day review in between each one of those. It's a little tough to guess at that because you just don't really know, but we're going to kind of use that as a starting guess to set a timeline.
my recollection is the worst thing you can do is tell them that you're in a rush.
Yeah. Yeah, from what I've been told, they have no schedule, so we'll do the best we can to move that forward. Brian, do you want to show real quickly the grant dashboard that we're working on?
Sure. I'm not as familiar with Zoom, so give me 1 second. Yeah, so Mike, and Kevin, we're trying to put together a grant reimbursement tracking dashboard that we'll have on our portal. Hopefully you can see it on the screen there. It keeps track of our 4 grants with basically the reimbursements by quarter to date, the individual buckets of money, and all of the reimbursements by category. It'll be slightly interactive where you can go and see what we've been reimbursed for to date, how much in each quarter. An example, ARPA here, we've submitted and not received about $160,000 So that's something to pull our attention to, and that's the point of this this dashboard. So we'll have that up on our portal pretty soon.
All right, thank you. Any questions on that? We'll let everybody know when it's up and running for everyone to be able to go in and check it. And it'll be just a live update we submit every quarter. So every quarter it'll be updated. And
No,
we,
just that I think this looks great and I really appreciate the transparency. I think it helps all of us just to be able to have that access to the information. So thank you.
yeah, if we want to put this on the website or make it a more public facing, we can do that also if that's something we would want to do at some point. So. All right, DC trip. The other items I was going to go through kind of quickly, and then we got two main presentations to do this afternoon. But let's go through the DC updates. I don't know, Mayor or Commissioner, either one, whoever wants to start with what you thought of the trip.
I'll defer to Mike and Jake if they want to weigh in first. Wow, we're suspenseful. I can jump in, I guess. I mean, I think we touched on some of it at the start of the meeting, but I think my impression was that all the meetings were very productive in terms of continuing to solidify the relationships. There was noticeable improved connection, I would say, into some of the offices based on those that spent time and came out here into the gorge. And so I think all the effort that went into that site visit in the summer was well worth it. But I think the big takeaway really was these dollars that are coming into these programs over this period of the next, I guess, 3 more funding cycles. They are really wanting to make sure as best they can that they're going to projects that they're confident will be shovel ready and will deliver. And I think that's what's tying back very tightly right now in our minds about the EIS, and the fact that that's laying out there. It kind of was reaffirmed in multiple meetings. That does bring some hesitation to our project. As much as we are moving all these other pieces forward, that's the outlier. And so I think for there, it was clear to me that we've got these upcoming 3 funding cycles. And I think our effort is best spent on how we make sure that we align the pursuits of this project, not just the new bridge, but how it's checking some of those boxes of the strategic plan that's coming out of this administration, which I think our project does really well, but also being able to check this box that we've got that ROD and that EOS is complete gives a lot of security to our project with the people making the decisions that they believe it'll move forward. So that was, I think we just came back very motivated to make sure that we continue to keep the pieces that support that effort moving. I think long-term, that would be an area where I walked away feeling like there's a hiccup or we're going to be held back if we're at the same place in another year.
Yeah.
I'll give you, go ahead, Commissioner.
Oh, a few other things that came up, they all want to know, where's Oregon at stepping up to the plate? And so I think Commissioner Fox did a great job, and Michael explaining how much work we've put into Oregon and hopefully where we can go from there. And then the other thing that they really emphasized was the cost benefit analysis and showing that, what we're doing is going to have the biggest bang for the buck from the feds when they're looking at, thousands and thousands of bridges across the country.
I think the other observation that I made, every one of the offices that we met with, we didn't have to go backwards and explain who we are, why we're here, the need on the bridge. Every one of them already knew us. And we didn't spend hardly any time going backwards. It was all, hey, here's the progress we made since the last visit. A lot of them came out to the day back in October where we met with everybody. They all referenced that. So that was very positive. Even in the, I think the discussion with the TIFIA loan, that was very positive. I think there's a bunch of folks just willing to help us when we're ready to go. Carrie, they're chomping at the bit to get a letter of intent and then start down through the process. So I think there was a lot of positives. The one negative that I had is with the second meeting with the Department of Transportation. The head guy, who was that, Mike, or one of the others?
Smalls was his last name. He was the deputy secretary.
He came in and kind of gave us guidance that was diametrically opposed to what we heard in July, which was they want to be shovel ready, and their view, his view of shovel ready includes design being done. And that's a little bit different than what we heard earlier. But I think we've got a way that we can scratch that itch by using this progressive design build, or somehow splitting out early projects that we can get through design very quickly and then show that we're ready to go into the field.
Yep, agree. All right, any questions or other comments on the DC trip? All right, then we'll move on. We went through the grant status. Really the only update there is we are preparing to submit a raise grant in February of next year. It has a maximum limit of 125 million. So Carrie's team is working to put that package together, and we'll be submitting that early next year for the
25 million, Mike.
What did I say? Sorry.
25. You said 125. That's
Oh,
good.
I'm
That's
sorry.
good wishful thinking.
Sorry
But,
about that.
yeah.
Yeah, 25 was in my head, just did not come out of my mouth. As far as the other items, we talked about the treaty MOAs and the NEPA status. On the RBMC, we're continuing to advance the geotech. It's working through the permitting process to hopefully be able to get out and get started on the land borings in January. And then we're putting things together for the preliminary engineering, and you're going to hear later here in just a little bit from Paul on project delivery method. So any questions on those topics? And if not, we'll switch over to communications real quick.
Mike, I want to make sure that next meeting, we do in fact have a schedule that you can share on both the geotech and the preliminary engineering, so we can start to see progress as we go there.
Yep, we'll have those. Brian's been working with all the sub teams and getting all those schedules pulled together, so we should have those things ready. So
Good, thank you.
all right, communications has got a quick update for you, Jessica or Alice.
Hi all. So I'm just going to show you very briefly the updated logo after discussions that we've had internally with Mike Fox, with Marla, with support, Kevin and Genevieve, in our project team. So just want to present really quickly what we came up with. Hold on a second, I gotta share my screen. My computer's a little slow today. Okay. Can everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the primary logo. We incorporated the actual bridge based on the current design renderings. We kind of elevated bridge replacement, that word, and Hood River White Salmon. We made the weight pretty central, so it wasn't weighted to one side or the other. We kept this palette that is more representative of the place of Hood River, so less maritime northwest and more high desert gorge area colors. And then just want to show you real quick, this is some variations on that logo. So we've got a black and white, we've got this PNG here that we would use transparent if we were on a dark background. We have a nice circle version, which we'll use in a lot of social media profile pics because there are a lot of them around. And then at the bottom here, we just have a sort of text, or sorry, a picture only with text to the left or to the right. So we would use this like as a header or in applications where we need to separate the words from the image. And then last, just going to show you an example of what it might look like on social media. So this, I think, is Twitter, though we'll see if we proceed using Twitter, but just as a social media example. Again, we'd have a nice photo. We could probably swap this out with a bridge rendering. And then we've got this logo in this circle application here. And that's it. So we've got some other things in development. You know, we're developing a whole branding guideline that we're sharing with the port. We've got a website in development, but this is for the primary piece. We kept it very simple, very high level, and really representative of the future and of the bridge. That's it.
All right, thanks, Alice. Any comments or questions on that? I did have them keep it kind of short, so if there's any questions on it.
Go back and look at this if you want.
Somebody needs.
I just got a question for the group. How do you feel about just adopting this and go? Could we see if we could get, does anybody want to have a quick discussion on it? If not, could I see some thumbs up? Okay. Mike, you're going to have to look because I can't see everybody.
I know Marla cares about labels. How do you feel, Marla?
Oh, I guess I had my thumbs up and then I took my video off, but I feel good. We worked through this a couple times. I mean, obviously we just used this last week in DC on that handout. And I think that it gives us consistency. It checks the boxes. I'm happy with it. I don't think we need to spend further time on it unless there's something the rest of the group sees that they just think is really a miss.
Catherine, you're okay?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I noticed was in the round format, there's a bunch of negative space, unused space at the top of the logo. And so you could easily put the words bridge replacement sort of in that arc space above, and then the Hood River white salmon below. Just swap those for that in that context, but otherwise everything looked good to me.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
And how about either Arthur or Bob?
That looks good to me.
Okay. And how about Mayor McBride?
It looks great to me. Thanks.
Okay, so you guys have got your approvals.
Great.
Keep going.
Thank y'all.
Good. And then Alice, you said you want to give them a quick update on when the website will go live?
Yeah, so we are doing kind of our final, all the kind of crossing the T's, dotting the I's, incorporating sort of links to the port site. We've added all of the sort of large, long list of archived project documents from the last 4 years onto the website. We've uploaded all of the past events, though it sounds like there might be a report on other past events that WSP is putting together that we'll just cross-check. And then we're also going to kind of add all of the past news entries that the port has done about the bridge. So we're probably about 60–70% done with kind of migrating all of the bridge information on the port site to this current site. And then we're continuing to do some upgrades or some updates now that we've got an approved logo. So the plan is, JLA, we're spending probably this week intensively making sure that the website is pretty much, the current draft is pretty much complete. I plan to send that out to the working group or to whoever wants to review it. Could be a smaller group or it could be the larger group next week, so in a week, and then giving you all over the holidays, so about 2 weeks to review it, with the plan of going live first week of January. Another component that we want to make sure that we build out, and I might connect with Mike Shannon and maybe somebody from the working group, Mike Fox, Marla, about creating a landing page for the bi-state working group / commission. So we'll begin to kind of draft some copy about how we want to talk about that, pull some existing key messages, and just make sure that we've just got something up there that talks about the commission and the working group and that timeline. So look forward to, in a week from now, a draft website. And then we'll give you approximately 2 weeks to review that over the holidays at your leisure. And then, when we come back that first week of January, we'll make whatever updates need to be made. And then hopefully we'll be able to launch by the end of that first week of January or the second week in January.
Great.
All right, so now we'll transition into our presentations. We've got 2 presentations this afternoon. The first one is from the Washington State Transportation Commission. They're going to give us an update on their study. Carl C. is here and he'll lead that discussion. So Carl.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate there we are. Thank you, Michael and Chair Fox. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today to share with you an update on the been listening to your conversation here the whole time, to the Washington State Transportation Commission's Hood River Bridge Traffic and Revenue Study. We did come, I believe it was in October when I last came before you to share some initial information about the report. So I won't go into a lot of background, but if there's questions along the way on the purpose and background of the study, I can certainly go back and touch more on that. Today, as a point of introduction, I'm the Deputy Director here at the Commission and also the project lead for this study. Today, I'm joined by two members of our consulting team, led up by CDM Smith, Yonel Gardis, as well as Lowell Clary, who I know you're familiar with from prior work with the Port of Hood River as well. So appreciate their time, and they're effectively here to address questions that are more technical in nature. So I can share, if I can real quick, if you realize I haven't shared my screen yet, so I can go ahead and do that if that's easiest. Let's see, I will go. Are you seeing the big screen, full screen view?
No, we're seeing your notes screen.
My split screen. Okay, I'll just swap this real quick.
There you go.
Okay, great. So first, well, as I'm just for the what we're covering here in the report and the presentation, I'll give you a brief update on where we are to date with the study, and then move into a discussion around the primary purpose of being here today, of discussing the preliminary tolling scenarios that we are going to share with our full Transportation Commission tomorrow for their review and possible approval. And then we'll leave some time for questions and answers, so I'm happy to address questions as we move through the presentation. So at a high level, this is our study schedule. And as you can see, we started in August of 2022, this past August, after having been directed by our state legislature to conduct this study during the legislative session of 2022. We have a plan and are directed to conclude this study by June of 2023. Along the way here, some major milestones include we've been conducting the data collection and analysis, and one piece I'll touch on here more directly on a current project, as well as beginning the work to start the traffic and toll modeling that will result from that data collection and analysis work. And so those pieces are underway, and also really thankful for the stakeholder coordination that's been taking place, most directly with Port of Hood River and the HNTB consulting team, but also with the opportunities to present here to the Bi-State Working Group and the work with our technical working group that we've compiled with individuals from local entities there in the Gorge area, as well as ODOT and WSDOT as well, to support our kind of analysis process and ensuring that we're collecting, hitting on sources of data and considerations for the work that we go forward with. So really thankful for that. So speaking to the current work that we have underway, I want to be sure we highlight the current travel survey and the upcoming freight interviews as well. You may have seen there's some information out about the passenger car survey travel survey that we are currently conducting. It started in late November and has the survey itself is open until the 15th, so later this week. The intent here was to have 600 completions of the survey, which really provides travel information about what people who are responding to this, what's their current travel behavior with the current bridge, and then putting forth some hypothetical situations for tolling, as well as information about the expected new bridge. How would that change their behavior? And so, though we had a completion goal of 600, we were happy to have seen that we have over 2,400, nearly 2,500 completions through today. This includes a nice balance of about 1,006 from Oregon and 1,325 from Washington. And we've had a strong response from both our emails to the BreezeBuy account holders, as well as our postcard mailings to the targeted zip codes on both sides of the river. In addition to the work that Port of Hood River was willing to do to hand out some postcards to individuals traveling across the bridge at different points during the survey. Finally, we do have 23 Spanish language responses as well. We put together a Spanish language survey in addition to our English language survey. And we are currently working to kind of boost that a little bit further as we can. Then in addition, we are getting underway here soon with our with interviews, survey interview with local freight shippers and carriers in the region. We've compiled a contact list based on prior surveys, similar survey work that's been done, as well as knowledge of who are the major shippers and carriers in the area, and have begun scheduling those interviews with about 5 scheduled at present, and a total of 20 interviews being our target. We do have a questionnaire that's been developed and put forward or developed for those interviews. Some high points of what we're addressing in the questionnaire are, again, somewhat similar to the passenger car survey. How do they currently use the bridge, and what's their purpose for using the bridge related to their business, as well as how would the new bridge design, which we know is a big impact for the freight community in particular, as well as some proposed tolling ideas impact their future use of the bridge as well. So it's more of a conversation as opposed to the online survey that we have for the passenger car state of preference survey. So we can really sit down with these individuals and have a conversation based on this questionnaire. I'll pause there and see if there's any questions on this work that's currently out there. Okay, happy to come back to that if there's some more questions about it. So moving into the study scenario process, this is a quick chart on laying out how we are going about developing these scenarios. I'll speak to some scenario development elements here in a moment that really what we've taken a look at to help inform developing scenarios. And then after that step, which we're in the process of wrapping up, we come to the development of the actual 8 preliminary scenarios. And so we have put some together that we've shared with our tolling subcommittee, kind of a 3-member subcommittee of our Full Transportation Commission. They've had a chance to take a look at that earlier in the week, though we've made some revisions. And so we will come to the full commission tomorrow with those 8 preliminary scenarios, with the intent for them to either approve for going forward or potentially give us some feedback and for us to have approved by January. So there's some work in progress there, but you'll see where we're at here in this presentation. That then leads to the preliminary forecast and modeling work around each of those 8 scenarios, which will then be brought forward to the full commission, and again have opportunity for others to see and understand where those have gone, but ultimately come forward to the Full Transportation Commission for approval of 2 final scenarios that we will then move forward with final analysis with, including sensitivity tests to make some help improve understanding of some minor changes around what those scenarios say. And then that will go forward as part of the final report to our state legislature in June of next year. So I can speak more to that, but that's the layout we have for going through this process. So, as I said, there's several factors we took a look at, and this is not I would say this is the full scope, but I wanted to hit on some key things that we took into consideration in reviewing, understanding what the current situation, current tolling is on the facility, and working to develop these scenarios. And so one, I'll move through these quickly. It shouldn't be new information to you, but if there's something here that seems off for that matter, happy to answer a question or even make a correction. Wanted to understand the historical toll revenue on the facility, but in context of when there has been increases over time. So if we're looking at, and I know there's discussion around moving forward with a rate increase as soon as 2024, if we're also fiscal year 24, if we're also looking at outwards with the new bridge increasing toll rates, understanding what that history has been, so that it gives us better context on the public's acceptance of rate increases. So learning that there is about $6 million in toll revenues generated in 2022, fiscal year 22, as well as seeing when that last increase took effect and the increase prior to that as well. So good information for us to take into consideration. And of course, what are those current toll rates and how that breaks out by different types of vehicle classes, and how that then is, what are people accustomed to paying under the current tolling structure. In addition to that, understanding that, knowing that the Bridge of the Gods being an alternative route to the Port of Hood River, and also a kind of a sister facility for breeze-by account users, seeing what those toll rates are as well for consideration on what perhaps we, as part of what if we're looking forward to toll rate increases, understanding where they're starting with over there at the Bridge of the Gods. So that brings us forward to some tolling context again for replacement tolling, or tolling that would support the Hood River Bridge replacement. That's for one, looking at understanding that the current Hood River Bridge, of course, has tolling that funds the existing bridge operations and maintenance, as well as a small portion for bridge replacement, be it just say administrative cost. And then looking ahead, working with Port of Hood River to understand the plan for likely pre-completion tolling, so a toll increase that would be on the existing bridge, pending, of course, pending approval, that would be dedicated towards replacement bridge funding, as well as then making sure we're aligning with the plans for post-completion tolling in terms of what it would be dedicated to, both looking at debt service, if under the assumption that there's some level of financial of financing for the facility, as well as ongoing operations and maintenance and repair and replacement costs. So we can really have tolling be able to address all those costs going forward. And I know you're looking at alternative start points for the completion of the new toll, opening of the new bridge, potentially. We haven't worked that into our assumptions yet, but if there was changes there, that's a discussion to be had, of course. Next, we wanted to make sure we took a look at what are some factors that might impact what type of tolling to put on the bridge. And in this case, looking at how tolling currently, or how the use of the bridge currently changes by time of day. As expected, there is the morning and the afternoon peak periods, and some higher midday compared to really evening and overnight. But overall, there's nothing here that would indicate that there's a need to manage congestion on the bridge. And so with that, we aren't pointing to looking at any variable tolling during the day. So because typically the point there would be to use variable tolling to manage congestion on a facility. Similarly, we took a look at a day of week variations. So looking at what are traffic levels during each different days of the week. And again, while traffic is lower on the weekends, it's not a huge drop off. And so not looking at so in that case, it speaks to one, there's not a lot of variation here to speak to point to having a different rate for different times of the week. And two, that tolling is designed to raise revenue in large part, with all these again being under not really needed to manage congestion in the facility, that we would look at to maintain the weekend rates as well, and to ensure that those revenues are being captured and therefore putting less burden on those weekday rates. This may also support ensuring that the traveling public, those who are not as local, are paying a fair portion by ensuring that kind of vacation travel perhaps is covered on the weekends, seeing that breeze by transactions are lower on the weekends and the weekdays, so to indicate that there's more out of region travel anyway, supporting those traffic levels on the weekend. Finally, in terms of travel differences, we took a look at seasonal variations, and I'm sure again not really a surprise to see these different travel behaviors, but summer months do have higher travel periods overall, maybe peaking up, sneaking there into early fall in October, for example. But in general, the summer months do have higher travel, but again, not levels that would indicate congestion to support really varying that travel by time of year. And even the breeze by transactions, there's a distinction there, though not as large as we would see on the weekends versus weekdays. Any questions or further maybe insights on what we see there, but at least what we're seeing with the travel patterns? I see Mayor McBride.
I have a question.
Sure.
For the percentage of passenger cars versus the ones that pay a lot more, ones that have 3 or 4 or 5, 6 axles, which are a lot more expensive to go across the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage in dollar value or numbers of vehicles do you have those numbers, so we could kind of go, oh, well, a huge percentage is one or the other kind of thing?
I don't have that in front of me. I could ask if, I don't believe Yanel has that in front of him as either way we could ensure we're taking a look at that. I know that question has come up in terms of that split between 2 axle vehicles, right? And say 3+, whatever number that might be. And even it's more difficult, but our recreational travel for say a truck with a trailer, right? An RV versus freight. But it's a question we are looking at, and if not able to answer now, if that information is available, we can take a look at that as we assess each of these scenarios to understand that question better.
Great.
Just
take it into consideration.
Yeah, we have the detailed numbers. Just the order of magnitude is the passenger cars represent about 98% of the traffic, and the bigger vehicles, the trucks, only about 2 to 3%.
Do we know how that translates into revenue?
I don't have it on top of my head, but we do have the numbers, so we can share that as well.
Okay, appreciate that. I see Commissioner Fox with his hands up as well.
One of the things that we got to kind of be careful of, I think part of the reason why the truck traffic is not as high as perhaps we would expect is the width of the old bridge and the weight restriction. With the new bridge wide open, unrestricted, I think we'll probably see more percentage of heavier trucks using the bridge than the current one.
And I would definitely agree, and whether there's information that can be, whether that kind of forecasted information would be available from Port of Hood River's work on understanding the bridge better, or from work that we can do, I'm not entirely sure. I would say the freight surveys we're doing can give us, while it won't be data specific to a forecast, it would at least be anecdotal information that would support, yes, we are certainly going to be using that bridge this much more, and give a good understanding of what local companies are saying about what they expect to take place.
Arthur's got a
The-
question.
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't really thought this through too well, but is there a strategy to vary rates seasonally so that you're hitting the vacation travel a little more heavily than you're hitting local travel?
Right now, we're not putting that forward. You can see that there is some variation there, certainly between summer and non-summer months. One way that, and you'll see it in here in a moment, one way we are looking at to address that is to have a larger variation, a growing variation really between the pay by mail and transponder rates, which will effectively help capture those that vacation travel. And then a couple options that may supplement that, say a frequent user program might be an option, or a low income user program, kind of one or the other. That could be a policy consideration for at least down the road, if not right away, to better support locals versus those regional travelers.
By that, do you mean like volume pricing?
Yeah, it'd be say 20 after 20 trips, you get a discount, or
Right.
you different. I'll touch on it in a moment, but at some level of
great.
volume
Okay.
pricing.
Thank you.
Any other questions, or I'll move to what we're speaking to in terms of the 8 scenarios. Okay. So as I mentioned, we do have 8 preliminary scenarios that we've laid out. I will here just touch on some additional considerations that maybe we can come back to this, but the next slide shows you what the 8 are. So if you have some questions around what I'm covering here, maybe you want to see the next slide, and we can come back to kind of consider them together. But what the approach was to develop, one, identify pre-completion tolling options that are being really, with the assistance of Port of Hood River and team, to really support what are approaches that are being looked at potentially for coming up into July of 2023, or as soon as July of 2023, so that what we're putting forward is at least an approximation, if not an absolute. I know you don't have certainty yet about what options to consider, but at least something that's in the ballpark of where you're looking at for potential options on the current bridge in regards to a potential toll rate increase. So we developed those options for the pre-completion, 4 options for the pre-completion, and then layering on top of that 2 escalation options for each of those 4 pre-completion options, to result in 8 different distinct toll rate options for going forward. So you'll see this in a moment. In addition to that, a couple assumptions that were made was that the cash and credit card will continue to be the option to the BreezeBuy account holders on the existing bridge until that is replaced, and that on the new bridge, the cash option will go away, and that it will be a video pay by mail option to the BreezeBuy going forward. And with that, you'll notice we've increased the collection cost for video above the cash price to better address both the cost of collection and leakage that can occur with that option. I see Mayor McBride has your hand up.
So on the on the cash, because I know we have people on both sides of the river that don't have checking accounts, don't have credit cards. Will there be some way that they could buy, for instance, go into, I don't know where, the grocery store, and buy a card that would have so many trips on it for cash? They could buy it. Will there be some option like that?
I can't speak to what that's been considered yet for Port of Hood River or for the future plans. I do know that's an option that's been put in place by toll facilities, toll authorities across the country, where you can, as you say, go in and buy a pass effectively with cash at it might be a gas station, it might be a grocery store, a convenience store of some type, or a customer service center in that case too, and in order to support the bankless or unbanked or underbanked communities that we're aware of. Commissioner Fox? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Commissioner.
And just a word of caution, what we're talking about here is some assumptions that are going into this study. None of these, Kate, are in concrete. It's really up to the bi-state and the new authority to decide how we want to do this. It could very well be that if we assume we don't want toll takers, we can have little kiosks. We'll have to play with the on-ramps and so on, but we could have a kiosk lane where you could put a credit card in, or this pre-approved value card throws in to be able to pay. Otherwise, it's breeze by. And not reading the last resort could be reading the license plate, which there's quite a penalty to do that. As far, it's like $1.50 extra charge for that, because you have to chase them down through MOD and elsewhere. So this is a scenario. We still get to play in that decision.
I guess so the point is that given that we're having this study done now, it's just a wonderful opportunity for us to at least consider some of the policy decisions. And if we decide on some things that are completely unforeseen in this, then there's going to be an awful lot of catch-up work done in the next toll and revenue analysis to figure out what that means.
Yeah, and we'll be doing, just for the bi-state working group, Carrie's team will be doing a more local evaluation of this. It's more of a pre-completion study. So there will be a 6 month work through with Carrie's group of a more isolated, concentrated look at the different scenarios that are available to us.
And Michael, I assume you're speaking to the pre-completion scenarios.
Yes, the pre-completion
effectively.
scenarios, correct. So
Yeah.
just so everybody, the bi-state working group's aware of that Carl's group's kind of up here doing the high level transportation overlook, and then we will take it into a deeper dive with Carrie's group and with the bi-state working group on a much more granular level over the next 6 months.
Yeah, and to that point, we're really the post-completion tolling is what our charge is really to address, but we recognize we can't project post-completion completion on the new tolling on the new bridge unless we really account for how you approach tolling increases on the current bridge. So, okay, I can touch on a lot that more on the next slide. Just to say, as I get there, the current toll axle multipliers, such as the higher rates paid by 3 or more axle vehicles, we're not assuming any changes to that, and we're not assuming any changes to the current toll exemptions, such as for the 2 tribal agreements that are in place for now. So here's how that translates to our tolling scenarios that we have put forward so far. As discussed on the top, you see the pre-completion toll rates and scenarios. Consider there's the 4 options there that are in the 4 different buckets of no change. So effectively keep the current toll rates and assume that there's no new revenues from tolling, or at least no increase in revenues from tolling that could be dedicated to replacing the bridge. Kind of a baseline of if there's no tolling, then all the revenues are going to have to come from whatever other source that you identify in the near term. Then there's a 100% increase option for scenarios 2 for in FY24 to really move that increase forward as soon as possible. But then that stays for the full time while for pre-completion. Then the next 2 provide step ups, 2 different ways to step up those rate increases. One, a 25% annual increase for both the payment options through FY27, and then the next increase would take place on the new bridge. And then alternatively, a 50-cent annual increase for the cash payer, while 25-cent rate increase for breeze by, and that would further differentiate the amount paid for the cash user versus the account user, to both encourage account adoption, but also to perhaps put more of that burden on the non-local users of the facility for raising revenue. So that lays out the options that in discussing with Port of Hood River and reviewing this work, what we've laid out for pre-completion, note that the increases, the incremental increases are all in a 25-cent segment in order to account to better accommodate the cash payments, knowing that no one wants to have to pull out a nickel in order to, or a pennies in order to pay a toll in cash. So keeping it to no smaller than a 25-cent rate increase and a 25-cent rate increment for the tolling on the facility.
Hey, Carl, this is Kevin. Can you explain or acknowledge the extra charges on the video options for post-completion?
Yes, I'll do that here next. That's a good segue to the post-completion rates. So for post-completion, this is assuming opening of the bridge in FY31 with tolling starting, and through FY51 as a horizon for potentially for financing. We have two options for each of us of the four pre-completion scenarios. So a 2.5% annual increase, or a 15% increase every 5 years, starting with that either in FY31 or FY36, depending on how soon that last increase was for the old bridge. Those are intended to address ongoing escalation in toll and toll collection and toll facility costs or bridge facility costs, and just recognizing that it's better to accommodate and to build in increases over time to help spread out the burden of when of paying for those increases, but also to make it more predictable about when we have increases, as opposed to waiting and then needing to have a even larger increase down the road and perhaps needing to catch up on your revenues in order to support some larger payments. As Kevin noted, in these rates, we've built in an increase in the video compared to of $1 in the video rate compared to the cash rate, starting in FY31. And that was based on feedback from Kevin and from the consulting team that, let's recognize that video collection, including increased leakage, is going to cost more than the cash booth, the collection at the booth, at the toll booth. And so to recognize that, taking a step to say, well, we're going to assume that the video rates are $1 higher than the prior cash rate was on the current facility. And then we've applied the escalation accordingly to those rates. The other step we've taken is to apply the escalation to both the breeze-by rates and to the video rates. And so over time, that differential, as you can see, in comparing 31 to 51, the differential between the breeze-by rate and the video rate does increase rather significantly compared to what it starts off in FY31. That's done in some places across the country. It's not done in Washington State, but it is done in other places across the country. And the thought was it would help share that burden of we all need to pay. Everyone needs to pay for the escalating cost, while also further incentivizing use of the breeze-by transponder, but also shifting more of that burden over time to those using the bridge from outside the local area. I could pause there and see if there's some questions, or I could speak a little more specifically to the range of rates you see there. Okay, so you can see there in looking at the post-completion in particular, there is a wide range of toll rates that could result from these scenarios, especially if you're looking at option 1A versus option 4B. At the breeze-by rate, it's pretty similar, or it's even starting in FY31 from as low as $1.02 to as high as $2.75 by FY51, which long time away for all of us, but nevertheless, as low as $1.09 for breeze-by under the 1A scenario, and on up to $4.75 and 501 versus 1135 for the video tolling. For analysis purposes, I do like to see there being some significant range, recognizing these are not, as Commissioner Fox has pointed out, there is nothing here that is being put forward as a recommended toll rate, and that all this would be subject to actually going through the next phase of traffic and revenue study, an investment grade study, as well as moving forward with actual toll rate setting. But it does give us that at the scenario one level, effectively, you're looking for revenues from non-toll sources almost entirely to pay for this facility, to pay for construction of the facility. You're effectively able to cover perhaps the operations and maintenance, but you're not covering construction. So that's kind of that bookend of, it's not going to be it's up to you, not up to us, but I really don't expect that being an option for the facility, but that's there to support that discussion of how much would this difference would it be. On up to 4B, which may not even cover the full amount. We have to understand how much that would cover, but it does start to put that question around what is an amount that toll payers are willing to pay, both 4A and 4B, different points where there's 4A starts off more expensive than 4B, but just 4B escalates more. So that's the intent there, in part why you see a big range. It's partly to support that discussion, so we can come with results in hand, be able to then speak to, say, in March, when we are, after having done this analysis, help answer the question of how much can tolling support in terms of going forward. How much can you expect to be able to, to fund the existing, I believe, $75 million that's sought to cover with toll-based financing? What would some of these options, how far would these options get you to that, or to get you more beyond that amount even? And with that information in mind, we could adjust the final two to maybe hone in a little more on how much, if we have a clearer picture of kind of what a target revenue amount is at that point, or a level of comfort for what would be some options for moving forward with. Mayor McBride, I do see your hand up.
My question is, and I think you may have that last couple sentences answered part of it, but I was wondering, do you have a slide that shows, especially for post-construction, all these different scenarios and how much they would bring in, each year for however many years, so that we could figure out, we're going to have X amount of dollars if we pick this number. Do you have those numbers yet?
That's going to be the work that's done over the next several months to really hone in on, because we need to do the traffic and revenue analysis to understand what is, if tolls are at these rates and with the expected traffic levels, what would be produced by rates at this level on this new facility, both on the existing facility for pre-completion, right? And then on the new facility for post-completion. But with the intent to do, as you said, to say, okay, with these levels, this is what we could expect to see what the gap would be between whatever is being identified at that point as the necessary amount for toll financing. And to cover, for that matter, to cover the operations and maintenance and the ongoing costs that would be needed for operating the facility.
Carl, could I just jump in and with the chair's permission, just to talk a little bit about the work that we're going to do relative mostly to the pre-completion work, but in the month of January, we're hoping to come, or we're completing our model now, and we're going to come before the bi-state working group with a tool that allows us in a workshop setting to kind of do a what if analysis. We'll have 5 or 6 key inputs on one side that will in real time generate outputs on the other side. And we will be able to say, if we were to set our toll rates at $2 for breeze by and $3 for cash, what would that mean to us over the next 5 years? And there are 2 things we'll be looking at. One is, what will be the toll rate in 2030 and how much financing will that support? So to your question, Mayor McBride, And then the other one though is, and one of the reasons we're looking so hard at pre-completion tolling is we're going into this project as a brand new agency with no reserves. And just like borrowing money to buy a house, when this lender looks at our creditworthiness, they're going to say, do you have rainy day reserves? Do you have an emergency fund? You know, and that's going to be in terms of you need to have a certain number of months of debt service in the bank in a restricted reserve that can't be used for anything other than paying your debt service if you get into trouble. And then the other thing I think is important to understand is just because, you know, we have $6 million in toll revenue today, if we doubled our tolls tomorrow, we might have $12 million in toll revenue. But not all of that $12 million is available to borrow against. So what you have is you have your total toll revenue. And the first thing you do is subtract out your operating expenses. How much money do you need just to keep the facility going on a day-to-day basis? The second thing you need to do is look at the life cycle cost of your facility and say, we need to be putting money away because we know in 20 years, we're going to have to replace expansion joints. And in 40 years, we're going to have to do significant work on our foundations. And you have to be building reserves for those things. And that might leave you with, let's say we had a toll revenue stream of 12 million. These are hypothetical numbers, but you end up with, let's say 8 million. Then they're not going to say you can use that entire $8 million to bond against. You're only going to get to use maybe, you know, in a brand new agency, I think we'll see maybe half of that. And so they'll say, okay, you got $4 million to work with. How much financing on a 35-year term at 3.5% interest will that support? So that's kind of the analysis. And we're going to build you a model that allows us in real time to put those inputs in and see what the results are. And that will help you focus in very quickly on, you know, at least what toll rates will support the financing we need. And that's one important parameter. The other important parameter is what will the community tolerate? And those are two things that have to be put together in a policy environment and decide what you want to do. And we'll develop this tool to help you do that.
Thank you, Carrie, from my side. And I would say that really supports, you know, us being able to come back as we conduct this analysis and then come back as a check on in March when we are moving to 2 scenarios for final analysis to say, do these pre-completion options in particular that Carrie references, are those still both reasonable and viable for moving ahead with, or do we need to make some adjustments to, you know, one of those scenario options to better reflect where the analysis is pointing towards and comfort level is pointing towards. So
if I could just add one more thing and then I'll stop talking, and that is that the lenders look very carefully at this report. And in fact, just before we go to market to take out a loan, we do what's called an investment grade analysis, which takes this, it's like this study on steroids. Yeah. And this is really the study that the market looks at to determine whether they want to loan you money, and if they do, under what terms. So this is really important work.
And Carl, you have 2 other questions there. Just
yeah, I see Commissioner Fox and then Arthur Babbitt.
Let's go to Arthur first.
So this is real quick. Carrie mentioned 35-year term. Is that traditionally what we look at in this sort of project, or are there other numbers?
Well, there's often 25 to 30. I understand TIFIA we could stretch that to 35. Is that what you're referring to?
That's
Carrie?
what I was asking. Thank you.
Yeah, and that number actually comes from a consultation that we had with TIFIA, where we asked the question, you know, what is the longest term that you could imagine a tolled project being financed for? And they said 35 years. And so that's a number that we're using. 30 years is probably more typical.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is just it gets increasingly difficult to predict long-term revenue streams from tolling beyond about 30 years.
Because of all the hover bikes?
Who knows what things are going to be like in 30 years? And the lender, you know, wants some security. So they get a little bit skeptical of anything that goes out too much further than that.
Yeah, when we met with the TIFIA folks last Thursday, we asked that question also, Carrie, and they were more generous, but we did have a discussion that you don't want to get a loan longer than your life cycle of your facility, number one. And number two, yes, they said you could take it up to, they even said over 50 years, but it's not something that we probably really want to do. Anyway, so
Yeah.
the other thing I was going to mention, and Carrie, you brought it out, is that over the next 6 months or 7 months, we've got to develop our strategy and our budget for operations. And start thinking about that. What kind of an organization do we want? What are we likely to see in the first 5 years on maintenance, which hopefully will be fairly small on a brand new bridge. But we got to be setting up these reserves, as you said, Carrie. So over the next 6 months, we've got a lot of work to do. And I think, Carrie, you're going to help us with that. Stand up our first operational budget.
I see Commissioner Anderson has his hand up.
Carrie, I'm guessing this is going to be like an Excel file that can input all that. Is that something you can send to us before that next meeting so we can play around with it so we're not doing it live?
I don't think so. And I'll just tell you that it's a pretty sophisticated tool. It is Excel based, but it's multiple pages. And I don't want to say no, you own it. You're paying us to develop it. But I'll want to work with my developers on that before I say that we would send you an actual copy of the background of the model. We will certainly walk you through how it works and how each of those numbers is calculated. But our hope is that it will be simple enough and fast enough that we could sit down with you and just run through any scenarios that you wanted to run.
Great. Well, one thing I wanted to come away with from this meeting is a sense of whether anything here feels really off, for one, in terms of what you would, what you're comfortable with in terms of assumptions around the pre-completion tolling in particular, because I recognize that much more as your process than that we need to are seeking to piggyback off in large part, and then as we transition to post-completion, ideas like it was helpful to have the feedback last week around the video toll rate as bumping up that rate as a starting point to better reflect the collection cost. If there's that kind of feedback, as I say, we're looking to finalize. We may well take away some additional thoughts from the commission meeting tomorrow, but really looking to finalize it, in January, so we can be fully underway by late January. With that, I'll note this will be shared at our public meeting tomorrow. That's on TVW and free for the media to see and the public. So know that if there's lots of caveats, our team will speak to that. These are not set. These are not real numbers that are being proposed right now in terms of actual toll rates. These are just here for analysis purposes to help us understand what different levels of tolling would provide for us, with some assumptions that we think are plausible for or better for applying on this bridge. Commissioner Fox, I see your hand up again.
Real quick, Carrie or Michael, is there somebody that's going to be monitoring that meeting tomorrow that could capture some notes and feedback to the commission or to our working group, any significant changes or comments that came out of that meeting?
I intend to be in attendance at that meeting. So absolutely. And I would not discourage any of you who wanted to invest. And in fact, it's actually agendized that the way the commission agendizes themselves, there's a specific time on the agenda. So you're not going to have to sit around all day and wait. And Carl, I would ask you, do they typically stay fairly close to that? This item is agendized from 4 to 5 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. And so if any of you were so inclined, you could certainly tune in.
We do stay very close. Typically we stay close. Sometimes we run early. So if you want to join, log in or go to the site a little early. But we'll be wrapped up by very close to 5. So, but we do a good job on keeping to those agenda times. So.
Well, some of us tomorrow have some travel training, and then we've also got a port commission meeting right adjacent to it.
I will attend that meeting, and if there's anything significant, I will certainly let you know.
And they're available on archive. They're archived on TVW, and so available. And in fact, I think we post a recording on our link on our website for that once it's up. It takes a couple days at least, but we do have that is available.
Carl, Commissioner Anderson had another question too.
Yes.
So tomorrow, when you provide this, you're not going to be able to say what each one of these could likely bring in tolling between now and then. And is that going to be a positive experience for these members of this commission who are saying, we're going back to asking, hey, we need another 75 million. And they're like, well, how much is this going to raise and how much are you bringing to the table yourselves? I mean, if I was sitting there, that would be my question.
Yeah, ideally we wouldn't have we'd have a clearer picture on how much that would be, but as Carrie is discussing, as you know, there's a lot of variables right now in what we know in terms of the facility, be it that the part of that answer needs to have a gross to net assessment of what can be provided for. So understanding those costs, operating costs is one piece, but also, be that we're early in this process in terms of analysis, planning level study, we need to do that traffic and revenue work that this assumes takes place over the next few months in order to really inform that question well. So part of our response to that is that when we come forward to them, that we can provide a better answer to that. We can really provide an answer to that when we get to March and before they select final scenarios that will be put forward in a report and carried forward into actually being shared with the legislature. This gives us the hypothetical different ways to approach it. We'll narrow it down with the benefit of traffic and revenue and some some cost information, and be able to then say, okay, we can make some adjustments if needed before we finalize those 2 options for further analysis, and have that sense of how much it's going to bring in for tolling.
And Commissioner, we will have answers to that question before we ask the Bi-State Working Group to entertain thoughts about a toll rate program going forward. I mean, that's key to you guys making a decision about whether you might want to increase toll rates in 2024 or any time between now and 2031. You will need to know the answer to that. And I would say April is a good target to actually have that information starting to get pretty nailed down.
And my last question is, I like your 8 different scenarios here, but when I filled out the survey, what I filled out and what I'm seeing don't seem to be a good connection. When I was looking at $6 and $8, and I've been getting emails and phone calls from everybody asking how crazy we are. So I'm just trying to understand, with your survey, how that works into this, what we're seeing, which is, at the very small end of that scale.
Sure. Appreciate that. Well, part that was directed to really test how much of the toll rates have an impact on travel behavior. And so while some people saw 6 to 8, some people saw lower toll rates, in order to help us understand if we're asking about X amount of a toll rate at exit level, what kind of responses are we getting? And then at an aggregate level, be able to put that information together to inform how much do these rates impact their behavior. Partly you can see the video rates, though. If the breeze by is one thing, that's we're keeping those low, but the video tolling rates you can see do go as high as 1135 on this scale. So we are pushing those toll rates for some potential users quite high. And this is just, we should note the 2-axle rates, right? And knowing that toll rates at a higher level with more axles can provide for further higher rates. So that's I recognize they don't fully match up, but that was the approach we were taking to that survey.
Thank you.
Sure. I think Mayor Hewitt was next.
Hey, so I missed the intro to this discussion. Is the tolling that is proposed here is 100% of the tolling that's collected going towards the new bridge, or is the tolling that was existing before still going to the port, and it's just whatever is it increased by going to the new bridge?
Sure. For pre-completion, those top two rows, the increase would go towards the bridge replacement. So when it says no change, option 1, there would be no new revenues going to bridge replacement. But 2A, scenarios scenarios 2 through 4, that the amount of the increase would all go towards the new bridge. And then post completion, certainly that would cover both the financing cost as well as intended to cover operations and maintenance for that new bridge as well.
Okay. And is there a scenario that we should consider that involves the recovering 100% of the bridge toll towards the new bridge?
Carl, I think the question relates to the weaning of the toll revenues. Commissioner Fox, you may want to address that.
Yeah, again, the top section would be only the increase. So scenario 2A, the breeze buy is $2. It's a $1 increase. So $1 would be going to the bridge replacement fund to start building reserves. To be able to take the entire $2, it's just not achievable because the existing bridge still has to be maintained. As you know, this year, we're going to have to replace the lifting cables as an example. That's like $1.2 million to $1.4 million that the port is going to have to spend. There's other maintenance charges for the current bridge that we're going to have to spend, as well as there's some other costs off the bridge that the port relies on the bridge today. When the new bridge is up and running, the port has to be weaned from that process. And we are actively working on it right now, but we're not there.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that should be if that should be part of this conversation a little bit more in terms of weaning you guys off of that toll sooner than 2030 or
Yeah,
2020.
Mayor, I think that'll be a lot more of the conversation that we're going to have with Carrie's group. That's going to be more specific to that, where this is more of a high level scenario option. The discussions that Carrie will have, that's where we'll get into those kind of details, and we'll have a lot more on those conversations.
Okay. I
Yeah,
mean,
quite the
my
30
feedback
years of,
is-
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Carrie. My feedback is mostly just like when I'm thinking about my constituents, I think that they would be okay with a moderate toll increase before there's a new bridge, as long as that, you know, they knew that what those toll revenues were going towards, and they would not want to be supporting any other port projects or anything, you know, like they really would care a lot about the details of how that money is being used to support an increase. So that's why I'm just pointing that out.
Yep, no, those are great points, and things that we definitely want to work through when we start having our outreach and communications related to that.
Well, and I think it's going to have to be a joint discussion back with the port itself. And that I know we've been spending lots of time trying to come up with ways of increasing non-bridge related revenues, so they're basically self-sufficient, and the bridge goes away. But we're not there yet.
And I guess I would ask if there is an amount that you'd identify to say, we actually need the minimum rate to be on 2A and 2B to be 225 and 425 to cover, to make it fully independently covered by toll revenues, then, if that's something you have in mind, we could address that now. Or if you come back to us and say, what's gonna be more realistic to get us really weaned off, and we decided to really make that a priority for the rate increase in 24, maybe that's something you come back to us and say, let's adjust that upwards so we could really make that policy choice, which I think to me sounds like a policy choice on your, for the port, to say, yes, we're starting that now, and we're going to apply that.
So wait a minute, I guess I'm getting confused. Am I incorrect in interpreting your chart? Scenario 2A up at the top and 24 breeze by. That's that $2 toll is going to create so much revenue. And the current revenue, which is based on $1, we're going to subtract one from the other, and that balance is what would go into the new bridge reserve for operations and other things.
The increment that results from the increase.
Right.
Will be that at least the discussion here, and this is a policy decision for you to make. But the assumption here is that of that $2, $1 will continue to go to the old bridge and to the port.
Right.
And the $1 increment that is new tolls will be 100%, and it'll be walled off. We'll help you create with your new CFO. Congratulations, by the way. Welcome addition to this project, and I'm sure to you guys. We'll want to create a firewall that basically protects that money and says it's a restricted reserve, and it is being, it is not available for any other purpose than the new bridge.
Yeah, so kind of thinking out a little further, if our attempts are successful, and they will be, we just don't know the duration. If we could take the $1 that we're collecting now, and right now, part of it goes to the bridge, part of it goes to maintaining other port properties, and the bridge is the old bridge. If we can wean ourselves off of it, say 2 years out, instead of an equivalent $1, maybe it's 90 cents. We need to decide what we're going to do with that 10 cents. Maybe we split it in half. Half of it goes into a port reserve, half of it goes over to the new bridge. All of that has to be figured out yet.
And that's 100% your policy decision.
Right.
And you're right. I had that a bit backwards as I was talking to it. It's a potentially you could reduce the toll rate, but no, you're right. That's I agree with Carrie and where you're going with that. That's a policy choice that, as I say, you could later inform us if we need to make any change on that.
I was just going to point out also that it is the 30 years or 20 years of post-completion tolling that drives Carl's work to the greatest extent, and it's going to be of the most interest to our potential lenders. The work that we're doing for the next 5 years is really just to set ourselves up to have the best, to be as attractive as possible to the credit rating agencies.
Right.
Right, so I'm just gonna do a time check here. We're at 3:45. We were supposed to go till 4 o'clock. We've got 3 questions here on this topic. And we need to get to the project delivery method. So I guess where does the group want to go from here? Do we want to take these 3 questions and then let Carl finish up so we can move on to project delivery method?
Well, one issue, Mike, I think we ought to mention just briefly, Carl, is your next slide about potential options. And I'm not trying to tie up your time at all, but I think it's something for further discussion later about any of these scenarios related to frequency or low income.
And that, yeah, I do have that one last slide. I could go to that now, or if there was a question, I see Arthur Babbitt, you have your hand up still. Either way.
Let's go ahead, Arthur, do Arthur's question and then go to your last slide, and then we can move on from there.
Yeah, this is more of just a comment, and I'm not encouraging us to have discussion on this now, but echoing what Mayor Kiewit said, to a person, everyone out there believes that this $1, which is already being collected, that part of that is going towards the new bridge. So we better figure out some way to make that true. And I will, and that's a policy issue which we're going to have to discuss moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. All right, go ahead, Carl.
Here we go. So I referenced a bit ago, we do have two options for either for discounts effectively that we'll be taking a look at with additional analysis, particularly around our final scenarios. And this we call that sensitivity analysis to get an idea anyway of how this would impact future toll rates and future toll revenues and potentially on impact on traffic as well. What we've put forward is potentially to take a look at a low income discount for low income users that in the area, as well as or alternatively a frequent user program that could be applied either as a 50% discount on all transactions after say a minimum of 20 trips a month, or an unlimited flat fee monthly pass set at a rate of 20 crossings a month. And then the low income discount similarly would be 50% off of a discount on BreezeBuy transactions. I don't want to get too wrapped around necessarily how what those options, the amount of the discount or number of trips, because we would have time to come back and revisit kind of the details of what level or how many trips that we would put forward. I would say important element of here is that it would be largely tied to local residents in that the discounts would require a BreezeBuy account and enrollment in either of the programs. At least that's the assumption we're making for this. So, it would really that would support defining who a low-income user is, as well as ensuring that we're maintaining that count of trips for our frequent user program. Our intent from policy side, the commission is interested in looking at what this looks like, especially the low income discount is something that the question is being asked around low income discounts on the Washington side of the border. We don't have one at this point in time, but I myself led up a study with a consulting team to look at low income discounts for our 405, 167 express toll lanes in Washington state, and we're considering what it could look like across the system, as well as, of course, you may well be familiar, both the Oregon tolling value pricing program certainly has been studying a low income program, and its potential for the I-5 bridge as well. So a question that's being asked locally and is beginning to be implemented across the country as well in a limited way for some facilities. So wanted to have that there. And then the frequency program, knowing that there is such a reliance on this bridge for local use, and wanting to ensure we have a way to think about at least what an option might be for reducing the burden on those heavy users of the facility. So questions or feedback on that? I see Mayor Kiewit with your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that a lot of the low-income users that would qualify are not able to use BreezeBuy because they are not able to get a credit card or a debit card. And so we need to be thinking and be mindful about the strategy that we use to give them a discount. And I would suggest connecting with either WAGAP or the Nextdoor in terms of like figuring out how like a great way to have those users be able to have that transaction essentially across the bridge.
And those organizations, I'm not familiar with them.
Yeah, so the Nextdoor is over on the Oregon side, and WAGAP stands for Washington Gorge Action Programs, and it's on the Washington side. And they both handle like food bank things and housing and that kind of stuff. And they would maybe be able to work with you guys on what kind of, if there's like a ticket or some sort of eligibility criteria that I just wanted to point out that the BreezeBuy solution might not work for people that can't get a credit card or a debit card.
Just a comment here. What you're talking about there, Catherine, is the mechanics of making
Right.
something happen. And we've got time to figure the mechanics out. And we will. If that's what we need to do, we'll figure it out.
For those who have a particular interest in this particular subject, low-income toll programs, there is another item on the Transportation Commission's agenda tomorrow morning at 11:30 that is on exactly that topic. I happen to know that because it's some of my colleagues at HNTB that are
Thank you.
presenting some of the low-income toll program implementations we're doing in other parts of the country. But that's at 11:30 to 12:30 tomorrow.
That's a great point, Carrie. And I will say from our experience looking at a low-income program, the enrollment and eligibility, as well as the ongoing capacity to pay or methods of payment, were really critical for developing a program and having it, like you say, really reach the people it needs to reach. I think while I say require a breeze by account, I think being part of that might be depending on what kind of flexibility there is for, as you say, making those payments, whether you need a credit card or not, or there could be alternatives for those in that program to have other options. So definitely, I hear that, and takes me back to our study we did to understand, especially unbanked or underbanked individuals, on how we could better accommodate that for a program. A good point.
All right. And Carl, we have one more question from Mayor McBride.
Yes.
Just very quickly. The last one where you say a minimum of 20 trips and then you say 20 crossings. Just if you could, you don't need to do it right now, but if you could make those more explanatory. Is a crossing mean over and back? Is a trip one way? Just in the future?
Good point. We should make that consistent, at least. That's probably right. I think our intent there was one way, but the good point. We'll get that clarified.
And Carrie, one other thing, if you would, can you either send out to this group or send it to me and I'll get it out to the group, the invitation for tomorrow's meeting with the agenda and the meeting details, so that they can have that if they would like to attend the.
Yeah, what it's going to be is it's just going to be a web link to the web page, because what you have to do is pre-register for the meeting online, and then you'll get, I think Transportation Commission sends the link, or is the link on the web page? One of the two.
Yeah, if you register, it'll get generated by Zoom and be sent out to you.
Gotcha.
There's two options. You can do that. That's really the best option. So you can, if you had a question or we could see you. Or there's a TVW, the Washington Gov site, that is also streaming on TVW. Carrie, I can send you the link if that helps to
would you please?
Zoom
Would you please? And I'll
registration.
make sure that it gets out to this group. Thank you, Carl.
Okay.
All right, thank you. All right.
This is Marla. I have one more question just to follow up on Mayor McBride regarding crossings or trips.
Yes.
It made me think, and I am curious, in looking at these different scenarios for tolling, could a consideration be brought forward, or was it already considered and shelved, what a round trip tolling cost would look like, so that you would pay only on one side and it counts as a round trip toll?
Would you, are you thinking in terms, Mayor, of
Carrie, tolling one direction only?
Yeah, unidirectional tolling. That's done on a lot of bridges. Typically, what they do is just double the toll. It makes the assumption that everybody who goes across the bridge one direction eventually comes back. I can tell you from my experience on the Golden Gate Bridge, that's not necessarily true. People figure out ways to go a certain direction around San Francisco Bay so that they pay less total tolls in their day. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking, if in those scenarios, and depending on where this lands and when the surveys come back, is there an alternate, maybe more palatable in presentation, where we're not just doubling the toll, but we're thinking of it that toll was slightly higher than these scenarios of single crossing, and what that could net potentially. But you're right. I mean, there will certainly be people that think about going other directions, even though admittedly those options here are a little more difficult.
Right. We've not looked at that, but yeah, it's an option. We do it on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. As Carrie points out, there are those who find ways to pay one way or not pay. They don't pay the ferry route going one direction. They don't pay the bridge going the other. It takes some patience, but it is a way to go for a small portion of people. But it is a consideration one could take. Yeah. Well, that's what I have today. I already addressed that we had the meeting tomorrow and scenarios by January 23. I really appreciate the abundance of extra time you spent on this topic. I hope it was fruitful for you. If there's thoughts that come up after this discussion, or especially after maybe you watch the commission meeting tomorrow, then certainly happy to answer additional questions or even consider some changes to what we see. Again, I'll run that past the commissioners as needed. But yeah, I really appreciate the time and the input.
All right, thank you, Carl.
Thank you, Carl.
All right, well, let's shift gears now to delivery method, and I'll have Paul. He's got a presentation to run through, and then we'll open that up for comments and questions on delivery method. So, Paul, you and Steve.
All right, thank you, Mike, and good afternoon, everyone. We are talking about the project delivery methods and our evaluation of different options for the replacement bridge. I'm Paul Houston with the HNTB team, and also online with me is Steve Howe, and we'll tag team different parts of this presentation as we go forward here. Just a brief overview of what I will cover, and Steve as well, is a look at what we've been doing since we last met with you in September. We'll provide a summary of the different evaluations that we've done looking at the delivery methods. We'll present to you our recommendation on how you could move forward, and then the next steps in how to actually put that into practice. So to begin, we've had a busy time since we last met with you in September, starting with an industry outreach forum that we hosted on November 7th. This was an online webinar format where our team presented to over 80 different people representing contractors and designers locally in the region and across the country. And we had advertised this webinar through various means, including through AGC, ACEC, and our various industry networks of people to get the word out. And it was a really exciting webinar because it allowed our team not only the opportunity to provide an overview of what the project is, but also give industry a sense of confidence that we're moving this project forward. And it was also then an opportunity for them to ask questions, and surprisingly, they did. There's a lot of interest in this project, and there were quite a wide range of questions that the group asked in that session regarding funding, regarding our activities to better define the project and look at risk issues, etc. So lots of interest there on the 7th. As a part of that meeting, we also extended an invitation to industry for those primarily contractors, but also some designers who were very interested in being a lead player in a future project to meet with us one-on-one. And since November 15th, we've had about 13 of those meetings. We've got one more coming up. And we're able to meet with various local, regional, and national contractors, sort of the marquee of names that you'd expect to be interested in a project like this, to really dig into issues that are important to them in terms of risk concerns that they see in a project like this, what they would suggest we do about those risk issues, information we could gather, how we'd share it with them, and also their thoughts and concerns about different delivery methods. So we really had a good set of meetings with those participants. And along with that, our team has been looking at similar regional and national projects and how the procurement and delivery of those other projects were conducted and what we can learn from those to influence options on this project. So we'll switch here to look at an overview of how we conducted these evaluations and the type of information that we put together in doing that. And for starters, Steve's going to give a brief recap of the 5 different delivery methods that we told you we would look at. Just a quick refresh on what those are. So Steve, why don't you take over?
Sure. And we presented these at our last discussion with you on the delivery method selection. But I'm going to do just a real quick overview of them. The first method we looked at was design, bid, build. This is how the majority of the agencies, DOTs, and other agencies that are delivering transportation projects do their projects. It's time tested, been around for 100 years. Under this method, the port would hire a designer. The designer would complete the design. The port would advertise that design out to the builders, the contractors that might want to bid on it and build it. Usually selected via low bid, and then that contractor would build that design. It's time tested. Like I said, all the agencies know how to use it. It also is one of the least flexible methods that we looked at. The second one that we looked at is design build. Under this scenario, the port would hire a contractor designer team, and that contractor designer team would take the design from about where it is or a little bit more advanced than where it is right now. They would finish the design and build the project under a single contract. This is common in both Oregon and Washington. Both the DOTs use that method, and some of the other smaller agencies in both states do as well. This gets you contractor innovation into the process because the designer and contractor are on the same team. But at the same time, it doesn't leave you much flexibility to deal with an undetermined funding stream. The third method we looked at was construction manager general contractor, or CMGC. In Washington, they refer to this as GCCM. It's the same process, regardless of its name. Under this method, the port would hire a designer. The port would separately hire a construction contractor. And during the design, the contractor provides input as to what the most effective way to build it is. Once that design is complete, then the port would negotiate with that single contractor for the price of that completed design. The next method we looked at was progressive design build. Very similar to CMGC, except for you hire a designer and a builder at the same time. The designer provides that design under your direction, similar to CMGC, but except that they're under contract with the contractor. Contractor provides constructability input during that design phase, and similar to CMGC, you would negotiate that contract with that single entity after the design is mostly complete. And the final one we looked at is public-private partnerships, or P3. And that is where we would bring somebody in that would bring private money to participate in the delivery of the project. It's common on heavily tolled facilities, especially those with high revenue streams, or on projects where the agency has a separate revenue stream and can make payments like a mortgage over time, over duration of usually 30 to 50 years. And with that, back to you, Paula, as far as what we looked at.
All right, thanks, Steve. So our next step was to identify various factors that would be helpful in determining which of these methods make sense for this project. And on the screen are 13 different factors that we looked at that we understand would be important to you and important to the success of this project. For example, the number 1 listed there is the overall delivery schedule. This is from today to the point where we can open the facility. How do these different methods stack up in terms of suitability to achieve that goal of opening a facility as quickly as possible? Number 2, project complexity and innovation. this is looking at how can the various delivery methods enable and facilitate bringing innovations to address the challenges of the project. How suitable are they for doing that in a project like this? Construction schedule, kind of a finer tune look on once the project is underway and construction begins, how does it stack up in terms of allowing a contractor to leverage their means and methods and achieve an accelerated project schedule, and so on down the list. We've got 13 there, different factors that each one having an importance in a project like this. And then we looked at, of those 13, based on what we have heard from you and know about the project, how might these be important relative to each other? And so we assigned a weighting to them. Now, saying it a different way, these are all important. All 13 of these factors are important, but we recognize some are more important than others to you. And so what we've identified here with either a 1 or a 2 is that relative level of importance. 2 being super important and 1 being important, but not quite as much. And this comes into play as we work through this analysis to help us build a picture of how these different methods compare to each other. When we look at the different delivery methods, then we want to rate them, as I alluded to earlier, within each of these different factors. Are they the most appropriate to achieve that particular factor? Are they appropriate, or relatively speaking, are they not quite as good as others? And then in some cases, they're not applicable. The key thing to remember in just a moment when I bring all of the factors and how we rated them is blue is what we're trying to achieve. We want the most highly beneficial performance for each of the factors. So we looked at this and came up with the table you see on the screen here. And what we are seeing is that there are a couple of delivery methods that have a lot of blue coloring, which indicates that they are the most appropriate or beneficial delivery method for those specific factors as you look down the line. So as we look at this qualitatively, what we can see is a couple of important things. First of all, looking at the different factors, the CMGC and progressive design build rise to the top as appearing to be the most suitable options to consider here. Now that's really interesting because that's also the message we heard from the contractors that we've been meeting with over the last month or so, is that prevailing theme of this collaborative type of contracting in the scenario that we're in, which is we don't have a fully defined funding plan yet. How can we best leverage a designer contractor arrangement now to further develop the concept design of the project, the staging of what that project will need to be implemented with funding as it becomes available? So those two things are coinciding, our assessment of the different delivery methods and also the feedback from industry. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the P3 or the public-private partnership model. Now, I know that you over time have heard from some P3 entities that are interested in the project. We heard from one of those as part of the group of 13 that we've met with. You can see, though, that it doesn't score as highly as CMGC or progressive. And there's a few important reasons to note as to why that's the case. One of the reasons is in terms of the level of information that we have right now is defining the construction of this bridge and the optimal schedule and staging for that. With P3, we add on to that the complexity of needing to define the future, the operations and maintenance and future turn back, or the point at which the concession would end and it would be turned back to to you and what condition you'd like to receive it in the future. And part of the challenge in the schedule component and the risk component is building out that clear picture of the ongoing operation and maintenance requirements that a P3 developer would need to achieve and the future condition. It's certainly a potential method. And as we have more clarity from Carrie and the group looking at the public kind of financing options, there may be a point in the future that it would be worth revisiting whether the private source of funds could present an opportunity that isn't there today. In general terms, the public kind of funding and sources that are on the table, be it the grants, TIFIA proceeds, are lower cost than the private capital, which comes to the table with an expectation for a predictable rate of return and builds in a risk profile and a future requirements for operation and maintenance profile, all of which build a financial model that tends to be higher price. So based on what we know right now, that's why the P3 model scored relatively lower than CMGC or Progressive. Now, what we're looking at here is based on our current assumption of not having a fully defined funding picture. We also did look at the scenario of if funding were fully committed or highly likely to be obtained in the next foreseeable future. And so the result of that evaluation is a slightly different outcome where design build itself becomes a much more viable option than it was previously. I'll go back to the previous page just briefly so you can see the change. Again, blue is best. You can see in that design build column, it goes from several yellows, which are least appropriate, to lots of blues. And in fact, it scores just about as favorably as CMGC and Progressive Design Build. That's if we had all the funding in our hand today or in a committed kind of timeline that we could tell prospective design build bidders, here's our funding picture that you can count on. This isn't our scenario today, but I did want to share it with you just so you know that we did look at this potential scenario. So where does that lead us? Well, based on the factors and the weightings that we walked through with you and the feedback from the industry and our understanding of where this project is today based on the funding plans and the likely phasing of it, we recommend the Progressive Design Build delivery method. This is in line with what industry has shared with us over the last month. It's also in line with what we're seeing across the country for these kinds of projects where, for various reasons, the need for a collaborative kind of development overrides other kind of factors that we have, for example, with design build. And so this Progressive Design Build model is what we would recommend be selected to move forward with this project. Now, how would that work? What would be those next steps to implement that? Well, first we would look to Carrie and the team to finalize the funding and tolling plans. That clearly is a key component of what we're trying to achieve and understand. And then we'd look to establish a definitive procurement plan that has a number of components. We'd look to bring on a legal advisor that has alternative delivery experience. We would want to clarify the roles and responsibilities for WSDOT and ODOT, particularly as it relates to Progressive Design Build and what their need and expectations would be to be a part of that process. And then also looking at a communications plan for stakeholders in industry. Breaking that down a little further, as we think of the Progressive Design Build model and what it would really take to proceed down that path. First, and most importantly, we would need to develop and advertise a request for proposals. Now, just for some context, that really means a number of different things. First, we would need to develop additional technical information to further define the project and the risk issues. Just like I said, we had heard from industry, there are a number of things that need to be a bit better defined for prospective bidders. And then we would need to look at what are the right kind of evaluation criteria that we would want to have in place to select that best design build team for the future. We would want to plan and develop a design build contract. And what we've seen around the country is that's an extensive document. And just for some comparison, what we're talking about for the design build contract is a document on the order of 200 pages, plus an additional 24 kind of exhibits that really build out the full picture of not only what are the commercial terms, but also what happens if things don't work out. What are the off-ramps? What do those look like? What kind of process would be in place for things like change issues, claims, and insurance and bonding in a progressive design build environment? And so that design build contract is a very complex and integrated document. And as a part of that, we would also build out the design build technical provisions, looking to adapt the best parts of WSDOT and ODOT's current requirements, and also then developing new special provisions that would be unique to our project, such as the main span across the river. And last on this list is the one-on-one meetings that we would look to start up with the prospective proposers to help them better understand the project and help us better understand their concerns and questions going forward into a procurement process. So all of that activity would really take 10 to 12 months, as we show here on the slide. And that would lead into then receiving proposals from industry, evaluating those proposals, conducting interviews with them over a 1 to 2 month period, leading to a selection and award process that would take a month to prepare all that information and come back to you for that final award kind of decision. So that would be the next steps. Clearly, with this schedule, we'll want to build out a much more detailed plan, but in high level, we wanted to give you a sense for what's ahead with this progressive design build approach. With that, I will pause and be ready for any questions that the group may have.
This is Commissioner Anderson. Would the progressive design build be the same time to get started as the CMGC?
This is Steve speaking. For the most part, the amount of time to get them to construction is going to be about the same. You could potentially get a little bit quicker into the field with the progressive design builder. And the reason for that is because that contractor and that designer can parse the project out more effectively than you can separate when they're separate. But they're going to be about identical for time to construction.
Yeah, Commissioner Anderson, this is Mike Fox. I agree with that based on my experience. Yes. And these timeframes, 10 to 12 months, is not excessive, again, for what we're doing and the magnitude of the work that we've got to do. You got to do it right here, or you really mess yourself up for a number of years. How about Arthur? Any questions, Arthur?
No, I'm searching for my mute, but no, I'm good.
So I guess my next question is, if it's going to be a year before we can even hire the group that starts designing for final design, where does that put us in terms of applying for grants and everything that DC wants from us at the 18-month window?
So I think part of that Commissioner, is that we can do through the preliminary engineering, we'll be doing some of that data collection and advancing some of that work. But yeah, once you get on the contractor, and the thing with Progressive, it allows you to do is to break out what they call early works packages. That would allow us to advance a portion of the project that we could get out quicker than having to design the whole project. And that was part of the discussion we didn't get a chance to really get into with the folks at the DOT in Washington. Was there are ways to parse out pieces of this project and get the construction and sequence that construction over time. So I think that's the way I would say we would get there quicker, is to do it through that method.
I think to do that, Michael, and I happen to agree with it, you know, during this procurement process, we've got to figure out how to segregate up the projects, split them out, if you will, to allow that to happen. So once the contractor hits the ground, you know, they're working productively on that first project that we can dump off and go.
And we can make that, and Paul and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, we can make that part of the procurement processes for them to be thinking about those, what a first early works project would be, to get some ideas as we hit the ground running then.
We could, and in fact, during our industry meetings, our one-on-one meetings, that kind of thinking was part of our conversation with most, if not all of them, is knowing that the funding availability, for example, would almost dictate that. That's top of mind for them, as to how best to stage out the work. And we could set parameters in the RFP to guide them in certain directions that we think would be the right first stages to do.
So as an example of that, we could say, hey, do the Washington approach first, and then layer in the design of the bridge and the bridge foundations, and then maybe do some pre-work over on the Oregon side if we need to set up laydown areas and staging areas and that kind of thing. So you can break it up, and definitely the last thing you want to do is the work associated with tearing the bridge down. You know, don't let them start that until the rest of it's well along.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, do you start out at a certain percent of design as part of the procurement document, and then as you identify early projects, you quickly ramp them up to 100% or in conjunction with the builder, and you just kind of keep working through it. But before you get to the RFP, the procurement process, is there some baseline preliminary engineering that's complete?
Well, in my mind, Mike, jump in, that when we talk about this preliminary engineering, what we're really talking about is being able to define what the project needs to look like, what specifications it needs to meet, what are the regulations that you have to apply to, what are your seismic requirements going to be, on and on and on and on. So what we've released HNTB to do is to go do that kind of work for the whole project. The geotechnical work that they're doing will be able to better define the foundation condition for design, that kind of thing. So I would expect HNTB, working as they are now, this through midsummer time frame, all of that data will be fed into this specification and work scope definition of this particular project. And then you start from there.
Yeah, no, that's correct.
Magical thing of preliminary engineering is kind of vaporware. It's really understanding what are the requirements of the project in the current condition.
Yep. You're trying to narrow down the unknowns on the project.
Now,
And
I know
also
you-
then,
I know you hate percentages. Are you
Pick a
getting
number, Kevin, the percentages don't mean squat. I've been on projects where we say 30%, 27%, 26.5%. It's all bogus. Because I can back up any number you want. And it's all vaporware. And I know
and I would
I'm
add,
saying that, but it's the truth.
It may be bogus, but it's not to the funders.
Yeah, and I think you'll see, well, I'll let Mike answer this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's truth to that, right? I mean, but it is looking at progress is what you really want to be looking at, and not so much percent. Is it, we want to be progressing work that's advancing things, not necessarily a percent complete of the overall work. That's more of the focus to keep the project moving, is doing work that's going to reduce risk, reduce the unknowns, and then allow us, when the contractor and the designer come in, to have a better defined playground for them to work within.
yeah, and I would add in, it's almost, it's doing enough early work in those high risk areas so that we've got really good information for design build teams to work with and understand what they're getting into. And then it's also setting the ground rules. And this gets to what Commissioner Fox was describing. It's those parameters, the ground rules, the requirements that they would have to work with once they got on board later. And it takes effort now to establish those, especially for the main span, because we're talking about the likelihood of having project specific parameters for the main span. So that all of that's in place for the design build team once they get on board. So is that 5%? Is it 10%? Well, it's kind of the ground rules, because we want to leave the flexibility to that design build team to be able to hit the ground running once they get started.
So something like right-of-way acquisition, would that likely happen after the PDB team is on board?
I would say you want to make sure you understand the envelope and make sure you've got your right-of-way program well in hand before you bring on the contractor. That's a risk item. Ideally, you'd want to have the rights to that land available to go ahead and build on. Don't wait until you're halfway through design and say, oh, by the way, you can't have the land.
Yeah, that would be a very early activity, Kevin, would be to lock down the property needs and start getting those working through the process too. So, and it's, it's one of those things, you identify it really early, but the actual process to get ownership of it is a very lengthy process, can be. So you want to identify them early and then start that process of obtaining property so that when the contractor's ready to go, you have that property in hand.
Great, thanks, guys. I'm gonna have to drop off.
So can, I don't know if Marla and Catherine and Kate are still around.
So Marla had to drop. She said to please send her the presentation, but it looks like Mayor Kiewit and Mayor McBride are still on.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Do you guys feel comfortable in trying to get a consensus to go forward with this progressive design build? Or do you have other questions that you'd like researched?
I'm okay with it. I mean, I think it's the best overall choice. I was surprised that the P3 came in as low as it did. And I think if inflation hadn't gotten out of control and we are still wondering where we're going to get all of the money, and we still may be in another year, then, that might have been an option because we might not have enough money. So, just taking that off the table as a funding source makes me a little bit nervous. Even though it doesn't rank as high, I see that, but that was, part of, unfortunately, years ago, if it had been done when the interest rates were lower, it might have actually made sense to do that. But at this point in time, I'm fine with this progressive design build choice.
How about Catherine?
Yeah, I'm also okay with it, mostly because when you showed the scenario, if we had our funding procured already, that it was still ranked evenly with design build. So I guess I am curious to know if there's a scenario where suddenly Oregon pitches a bunch of money in and we get some of these grants. Is there a scenario where we would want to ever shift the program, or if once we commit to it, we're committed to it?
So we talked through that process. Paul, do you want to kind of just go to what we talked about on that?
Yeah, sure. There is opportunity to shift. However, the further you get into, in this case, progressive design build, the more difficult it would be. If you get to the tail end of that 10 to 12 month period, you're in the midst of a procurement, it would be disruptive. And what you'd have to weigh, we would weigh with you, is the impact of switching at a later time and the message that's sending to industry. Now, presumably, we suddenly have all the funding, that's a good message, but still it's disruptive in the process the farther you get into it. So if it's a change early on that's more easily managed than a change later in that process.
Let me see if I can throw something in there. If the two options you're looking at is design build versus a progressive design build, and right now we start with the progressive design build, and for the next 6 months, the guys are building the packages for procurement based on a progressive design build. Switching it over to a design build is probably still doable and probably warrants strong consideration. And that from a bi-state working group position, if you had all of the funds available on day one, I would definitely go design build. The involvement that we would have is still going to be considerable, but it would be less than the progressive design build.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be more decisions that we're going to have to make as we go through the life of a progressive design build, instead of having it all done up front with a design build. And what I'm talking about is we're going to have to negotiate construction price on a sub package for progressive design build. Whereas in a design build, you've got the market setting that rate. That's the big difference. So I would guess somewhere halfway down this 10 to 12 month timeline, if magic appears and we get all of the funding, then I think we ought to take a real hard look at converting over.
Mike, can I get in on this?
Yep.
I kind of have to call the code on this. We're 2.5 hours into a very complex meeting, and now we're being asked to make what's a pretty critical decision, and I don't feel comfortable at all with this. I think that we need some time to study this and to discuss this with a fresh, with a fresh brain. I know that you understand this, and normally I would say just ask Mike, let him decide, but I'm going to have to justify this and explain it to people, and I'm not following I'm not gaming these scenarios well enough. I think that Mayor McBride brought some stuff up, and several other people brought things up concerning what ifs, which I don't know that we've fully considered, and we need to be able to tell the public that we have.
So let's, and I'm fine with that, Arthur. So how about, as an option, how about if all of the members send in questions that you have back to Michael, and we spend the next couple of weeks. I guess our next meeting's not going to be until
January.
after Christmas.
January 9th is the next meeting, so we have
Okay.
between now and January 9th.
So let's make sure January 9th, we set aside a big chunk of the meeting to resolve any issues that we've got on this thing, and hopefully we come together with a consensus to move forward on.
Yeah,
what-
let's start the meeting with it and decide right at the beginning, have the discussion, decide right at the beginning, but I don't like, half the group has already left.
I'm fine with that.
We can do that. We'll, Paul, if
Who
you
all
could,
left?
Who was that?
Who all left so far?
Marla is,
Marla's gone, Bob is gone, Christie's gone.
So I just have the question, would be, I don't think we're gonna do a design build because we're not gonna have the money in hand by the time we make this decision. So let's just take that off the table. We have the recommendations from the people that we're paying all the money to, and that's either CMGC or Progressive. I don't like spending almost another month waiting for a process that's going to take 10 to 12 months when we need to get this process moving and get these people moving on these projects. Whether it's CMGC or Progressive, I think it's pretty much the same. And we need to get started on all those projects as quickly as possible. I think it's a fool's errand to think we're going to have all.
We lost you.
I'm good with another meeting if we have to have one in December. I'm not ready to decide something today.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I understand Jacob's request to have it be urgent, but also, I mean, it's the holidays. I don't know that anyone's really going to be launching into a new thing between now and January 9th, even if we gave them the green light today. I don't know, Michael, you might know better, but I think we have the time, is what I'm saying.
I think this is so important. I think we got to take the time.
And the other thing is that regardless of which way we go, some of the information that I believe anyway, tell me if I'm wrong, that you would need to get out to whoever for whichever way we go is going to be the same. So,
that's
you
correct.
know, there is some work you could do between now and January 9th. We aren't just dead in the water, even if we don't fully have it figured out today.
You're correct.
Am I right? Okay.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that we could actually move forward with that won't take a lot of time, but will make progress towards any of these delivery approaches. And especially on the technical side, it's pretty much the same. The only thing that's different is, development of contract and procurement documents. They would be slightly different, but there's progress we can make there without spending much money or wasting much time.
So can we agree for HNTB to go ahead and start the process, start working on, well, actually, the first thing you ought to do is lay out the schedule, a detailed schedule of this, and pay attention to the ones that are common to CMCG versus Progressive Design Build, and work on the common ones first. And then on January the 9th, we come back. In the meantime, ask any questions that you need, respond to the questions, and hopefully we come together with a consensus on January the 9th of moving forward.
No, that sounds good. And Paul, can you email this out to the group after the call today?
Yes.
Will we be able to get from HNTB their recommendation between Progressive Design and CMGC and the reasons and rationale between the two rather than just the the green lines. Primarily to me, it's which one's going to save us more money in the build.
Yeah, Paul, can you put that as part of your email? Can you take the CMGC and Progressive and provide a little narrative between those two?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that, Jacob and I and everyone else are measuring success the same way. I'm just not convinced yet that I understand it well enough to give a thumbs up.
Okay, and if you have, like the commissioner said, if you have any questions, email them out and we will provide you with any additional information, or could do one-on-one meetings. Arthur, if you want to sit down for an hour and go through something, we'd be happy to sit down and go through it with you and go through any questions you may have.
Yep, that may work.
So
I've just
and
learned
that
not
goes
to,
for everyone. I mean, anybody that wants to sit down and do that, let us know.
I've just learned not to be backed into a decision at the end of a long meeting.
Yeah, understand. Mayor,
Kate, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, it's hard when you're making a big decision like this at the very end of a long meeting. That is really not good. I guess you just, take the comments that I have already made. I'm not going to send anything in, but, I was concerned about the financing. And, this doesn't really consider what if we don't have enough money going these directions. And so, that's my main concern. So I guess, if you bring information back last time, as my last hurrah, if you could explain that a little bit better to everyone else, since I won't be here. This is my last meeting. But I just, that's my parting thought, that at least everyone could get a little bit more information about that.
okay, and just to clarify a little bit on the P3, P3 was basically you're getting a private loan instead of getting a TIFIA loan. And then you would be paying that private loan back to a concessionaire at a much higher rate. So that's really I would say, if you want to narrow it down to the differences, is a P3 is among some other big things, but I mean, one of the big things is that it's not free money. It would just be money being advanced by a private investor rather than a loan from the government at a much higher interest rate.
Right. But what I understood was that, for instance, if we could still get a TIFIA loan for the lower rate, and we could still get all these other grants for whatever we're trying to get them from. But if we only, if our revenues for the tolling could only provide us with, 50 million or 70 million, and we still had a gap of another 100 or 20 or 50 or whatever the number was, million, that's where the private money could come in. Not the whole thing, at all, just a portion of it. If we were like, well, we can't build this unless we have that money. So that's what I wanted to look at.
No one's going P3 unless it means that otherwise we don't get a bridge.
Right. And I totally get that. I totally get it. But to make a decision now that P3 is out of the question when we don't know where all the money's coming from makes me nervous.
Right. That's my point too.
The P3 is going to need to get back all the money they put in. To Mike's point, it's not free money. And so the way they do that is with tolls. And so
we know all of that.
We know.
We also know that they did their calculations based on longer time periods, which
that
we
may
don't
be
necessarily have the ability
true.
to do.
That may be true.
That can make a big difference.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a plan of attack.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, so our next meeting is January the 9th. And this will be right up on the top of the list.
Yep. Item number 1.
Before we leave, I would like to just say thank you to Mayor McBride for all the time and effort she's put into the Bi-State Working Group. She's done an amazing job. I had a great time with her in DC, and I wish her all the best moving forward.
Amen.
I second that.
Thank you. Thank you so
Hope you feel
much.
better. Hope you feel better.
Yeah,
too.
this is my 8th day of the flu. Oh my God. Head cold, kind of bad head cold, fever, all that stuff. So
One last thing, folks. If we don't see each other prior to Christmas, I wish you the best. Hopefully you can take some time off and spend family time. And And looking forward to working with you next year.
Yeah, I see a tree in the background, but I don't see my present there.
It's there. It's there.
Oh,
Come
okay.
on up.
I'll come over and look. Bye-bye.
Thank
All
you,
right,
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Have a great day.